Welcome to Life with Strings Attached. I'm your host, Jamie Gale. This is the second part of a two-part episode with our guest, George Gruhn. If you've not listened to part one, we suggest that you go and do that first, then return here for part two.
But in the case of acoustics, I think you get to pushing limits as far as you can go.
What would those limits be?
Well, for example, about a week ago, I sold a 1941 D45 Martin that I think is the best sounding flat top acoustic guitar I've ever heard for a steel string guitar. And I find it hard to imagine being physically able to make something that's going to do better. I've played a heck of a lot of guitars, and pretty much everybody who's played that guitar says they've never heard anything like it. It can do virtually anything you'd ever want a steel string flat top guitar to do. And it does it extremely well. And I think just when you get to the physics of what you can do with wood and basic design structurally, I don't think that you'll likely come up with better than that. On electric guitars these days, it's going to be tough to get a better tone than you get out of good PAF humbuckers or the early 50s bridge pickup on a Tele. Changing body shapes doesn't amount to squat. Changing neck shapes does.
How can you say that?
Changing body shapes on a solid body guitar doesn't amount to much.
So a Telecaster with humbuckers will sound like a Les Paul with humbuckers?
No, it won't, because the structure of the guitar is different enough that the vibration pattern of the strings is not the same.
Yeah.
So if you put...
So an SG sounds like an Explorer?
No, they don't, because an SG is thinner. The SG is...
How do you define shape then?
I consider the SG to be a stinking poor design. Now, they could improve it.
We're talking about good or bad. I'm just challenging you, saying changing the shape doesn't change the sound of the guitar. And so what is the difference between an Explorer and an SG besides the shape? Structurally, they're much the same.
Radically different. The Explorer has a neck joint that's rock solid stable. The SG does not. The Explorer has a much thicker body than an SG, and it's different wood. The bridge, it still is basically the same bridge as you have on an SG, but the string vibration on a thick Carina wood body and a very solid neck joint is going to do you a whole lot better on sustain than an SG.
Well, sure. Now you're dialing into structural differences, but you think that the shape is not different?
The shape is not the important part. You could make the Explorer in a different shape and it would still sound about the same.
Yeah, okay. Well, we can agree to disagree on this.
The Flying V, I can't help it if you're wrong.
No, physics don't support it.
The physics does support it.
So if you have a longer piece of wood, your amplitude changes than a shorter piece of wood.
Yeah,
that's why the shape affects how the guitar vibrates. And that's what
you can do.
Is.
You have to have enough to do it right. But you get, after a point, it doesn't matter. Like on the Flying V, it cuts too much away from near the bridge. So it doesn't vibrate as well. It doesn't give you the string vibration the way it does on an Explorer. The Explorer sounds better than a V.
But they're structurally
different. And that shape does matter. Yeah. So of course, if it's big enough, if it's thick enough, big enough that it gives you the right pattern, you can do significant changes in shape on a solid body, much more so than you can on a flat top or on any acoustic. There's limits on what you can do ergonomically on the shape of an acoustic guitar. It has to be, if it's too big, you can't hold it. And it does matter, the depth, and there's so many variables that you can do. Thickness of top, ratio of thickness of top to mass of bracing, position of bracing, size of the braces, scalloping or not scalloping. There's an enormous amount of variety.
Yeah.
But Martin and Gibson, prior to World War II, really did some great sounding acoustic guitars. And by the time the 70s came along, the quality of the new guitars was terrible. The Gibson acoustics with the double X and the shallow neck angles so the bridges were super thin. Those guitars, you don't even see very many of them anymore because most of them have fallen apart.
It's what spawned the boutique luthier movement as well. They all come up in the 1970s as well, late 60s, early 1970s. That's when they start making guitars also and trying to improve
Well, there were a
from
lot
their
of
perspective.
there were more people getting into trying to build custom luthier guitars starting in the 70s and increasing onward.
Yeah.
Partly during the 70s and into the early to mid 80s, most of the new ones were pretty poor. People they'd rather have an old Martin or an old Gibson, but they couldn't find enough of them. There weren't enough to go around. And the new ones were notably not as good as the older ones. Yeah, there's a huge difference between a 1965 Martin D28 and a 1970. The 65 is Brazilian rosewood. It has a small maple ridge plate. It has ivoroid grained bindings. It has a tortoiseshell look pick guard. It has genuine ivory nut and saddle. And it has a Geib case. The 70 has Indian rosewood. It has a big rosewood bridge plate, which dampens sound. The intonation is bad because they put the bridges in the wrong place in the 70s. So they don't intonate well. Neither one had an adjustable truss rod. They didn't do that till 85 with Martin. But they had plastic nut and saddle on the 70. They had that Freistadt case that was molded plastic, which was a piece of crap. They had black pick guard rather than the tortoise look. But they didn't sound the same. They didn't look the same. They didn't feel the same. They sent them out with very high action. And then it was said that the dealer was supposed to adjust it to whatever action you wanted. I was a Martin dealer back at that point. Hank Williams Jr. wanted me to get him in a D41. And it came in with action that you could play Hawaiian on it. You know, we could adjust it down, but most dealers don't know how to do that. The average dealer doesn't do setups very well. Now the Martins come in, they're set up just fine from the factory. We don't have to set them up typically. But the quality of the new ones, particularly starting in the mid-60s, the quality of the new ones went way down. You compare something like an ES-335 in 1965, at the beginning of the year, it had the right body shape, the Mickey Mouse ears, it had a 1 11/16 nut, it had nickel-plated hardware, it had a stop tailpiece, good pickups. By the end of the year, it was a much narrower neck. The neck contour, even in cross-section, was clumsy. Different shape, different width, chrome hardware, trapeze tailpiece. It was a totally different feeling guitar. Look at something like the Firebird. At the beginning of the year, it was neck through. The pickups were individually routed in the body. The banjo-style tuners, which were not practical because they put them in the case and the tuner touches the case. Break peg heads off easily. But still, by the end of the year, actually mid-year, it went to the non-reverse body with the glue-in neck, and it had a swimming pool route so that you could have 1 pickup, 3 pickups, 2 pickups. It didn't matter. They all fit in the same route. And the electronics were fastened to the pick guard, more like on a Fender, not done into the body, and then a pick guard put later. And they didn't sound the same. They certainly didn't look or feel the same.
Yeah.
The neck dimensions were very different, and totally different guitar.
Yeah.
And also, by the mid-65, you could get a Firebird 1, with 2 P90s, which is different than what it had before. It used to be the Firebird 1 had 1 pickup, but the reverse body, the non-reverse had 2 P90s. The Firebird 3 had 3 P90s. The Firebird 5 had 2 of the metal-covered mini humbucker types with no poles. And the Firebird 7 had, that had the 3 gold-plated, but the body and neck were the same on all of those.
Right.
They were dot inlays. It was the exact same neck and body. All they did was change whether they had nickel or chrome or gold hardware, and what pickups they'd put onto the pick guard, but that was it. Mm-hmm. Total change. Mm-hmm. And they were not as good. And what happened was management at the company. Mm-hmm. Ted McCarty left, and within a matter of months, quality went down. Mm-hmm. It was still owned by CMI, but the quality went down. Mm-hmm. With Fender, Leo sold the company to CBS, and by mid-year, the quality was going down and changed radically. Mm-hmm. And the pre-CBS Fenders are still real good. Mm-hmm. But it is true that Van Halen and folks like Grover Jackson really designed heavy metal guitars that were very specific for heavy metal, that were radically different from anything before. That wider, flatter neck, and switch systems, and just pickup configurations that really suited heavy metal. That was a different thing.
Yes.
We don't see much of that. In fact, I can't even hardly remember when we last had a genuine early Grover Jackson.
I can't imagine why someone would try and bring it to this store and sell it in this environment. This is not what you think of when you think of Groove guitars. It doesn't fit the narrative. There are stores who sell them.
Could sell it.
Yeah. Well, I'm not saying that you couldn't sell it, George. Don't get me wrong. But everyone has to deal with the way the public perceives them, right? And the public perceives the store primarily as a vintage of a particular era.
Yeah, but it still gets down. For example, going to guitar shows. I can't remember hardly going to any Nashville vintage show and seeing an original early Grover Jackson. They're just not there.
Yeah, I couldn't argue with that. I do know that when people are getting them, they are selling, and they're selling for higher prices than people expect.
Oh yeah.
Early Ibanez JEMs, early Jackson V's, they're catching good dollars, but I haven't heard about masses of them. I know that.
Well, I remember the Grover Jacksons from when they were brand new. Yeah. I saw them at NAMM, and he had, all sorts of wild finishes, and I didn't appreciate them much at the time. I could see that they were very well crafted, but they were not for anything that my customers wanted. Right. But they were obviously well made. And one of the things that really started collecting and started boutique building was a period in which the musicians were good and the music was good, but the quality of the new instruments from the major manufacturers was bad.
Cedar Creek Custom Case Shop is your premier fretted instrument custom case maker, and we invite you to create a musical instrument case unlike any other, one that's unique to you. Every Cedar Creek custom case is hand-built by highly skilled craftspeople using only select woods, Providence Forge hardware, and premium instrument-friendly materials. At Cedar Creek Custom Case Shop, we are dedicated to helping you design the case of your dreams. Find out more at cedarcreekcases.com.
And Fender when it was owned by CBS, they were not at all receptive much to public demand. They didn't listen. They were just bean counters, and they did not really value quality. And the same really is true at Gibson. When McCarty left, they had a succession of different managers, none of whom were any good. And by the time it got around to when Norlin bought Gibson, the company was on the brink of collapse. But it's also true that when Henry Jeskowitz took over at Gibson, it was also on the brink of collapse then. He got it for like $5 million on an IOU with no money down. And of course, Gibson now is in turmoil because Cesar hasn't been able to raise the money to buy it from KKR. We'll see how that develops. But it's the world's evolving no matter what.
Sure.
The whole world is evolving in lots of ways.
Yeah.
But musicians were very creative during the 70s at a time when the quality of the new instruments sucked. And that created an interest in collecting, but also a lot of these musicians weren't collectors as much as they wanted good guitars. And they would buy up as many as they could. But it did drive a collector's market because there really wasn't a big collector's market earlier. I'd say that the collector's market pretty much started with the baby boomers. Our parents didn't collect guitars.
But they're the guitars of the parents, are they not?
Yes.
Yeah. So is that a necessary part of the equation, do you think? Do you think that we have to have a generation and a body of work associated with a generation that a future generation will pick up? Is that a necessary part of the equation to find value in it?
I really don't think it is.
No.
I think that what happened is that the quality of the old guitars was really good. And when the quality of the new guitars was down, the good players bought old ones because they did what they wanted. And even with Stradivari and Guarneri violins, Stradivari and Guarneri did not envision modern classical music. And in fact, all of those violins have been hot rodded, as you probably know. Like A440 was not standard pitch in those days. The torte bow hadn't been invented yet. The design of the violin, the body was the same shape. The peghead was the same shape. The scale was shorter. The fingerboard was shorter. The bridge design was different and was lower. The neck angle was shallower. The tailpiece design was different. The bass bar was shorter, and it was all gut strings, including the first string. But it wasn't up to A440. Now, it was in the very early 1800s, Paganini wanted violins that he wanted to be able to play solos. And he wanted that power. Classical music was evolving. In Mozart's day, there are no violin solos in any of the Mozart compositions. There's no violin solos in any of Bach's compositions. Bach's compositions are chamber music. There's not a full classical orchestra. It's Baroque. And Beethoven, or actually Mozart's one of the first to really do big symphonic pieces. One of the first, certainly not the only first, but there were other composers of the period, but they were branching out into larger groups. But even Mozart's piano had a wood frame. It was double strung. It didn't have 88 keys. It had Viennese action. You could play those pretty trills. If you try playing Mozart on a 9-foot Bosendorfer or Steinway, it doesn't sound like his music. Their main, you can play Rachmaninoff and bang on it on a big modern piano. It has a cast iron frame. You can have 32,000 pounds of string tension on it. You put that on a wood frame piano, it's going to fold like an accordion. But all the violins today, if they're original old Cremona violins, they graft the scroll onto a new longer neck. It's set in with a different type joint. The old ones had the neck nailed in. The nail wasn't visible externally, but it was from the inside. It was a nail to hold the neck in place. And they had a shorter bass bar, so they'd pop the top, put in a longer, heavier bass bar, have a longer neck, longer fingerboard, sharper angle, higher bridge, different design tailpiece, and then the modern Tort bow, which is modern, like early 1800s still, but those bows are not Italian design, they're French. And Stradivari and Guarneri didn't envision the kind of music, that kind of music didn't exist yet. But, you know,
And
today,
that doesn't make you think to stay more open in possibilities for the future? Because I still
can't
think you're
rule out
very
the possibility that there are look,
Yeah.
there are possibilities for new music, but so far as acoustic guitars, you get to a point where I don't think that you can easily design a violin to do more than it does. They're actually just about the limits of what physics can do. And acoustic guitars are pretty much also pushing that limit.
We're not concerned with that limit as much anymore. So
A lot of the new sounds are electronic.
yeah, well, electronic, lots of it is being done acoustically as well. But George, from my observations, I think that we often run a lane of acoustic guitars, we run a lane of electric guitars, and we don't often talk about their influence on each other. And the modern progressive acoustic guitar players that I see today, some I think you know quite well. I think you probably have a close relationship with Tommy Emmanuel. I think he lives in this town. I think you know
Well,
Tommy.
obviously he's playing on acoustic with a pickup.
No, I get that. But hang on. Let me finish the sort of thought for a second. Tommy's early career was electric guitar playing. Andy McKee, Manelli Jamal, these sort of progressive fingerstyle players were all electric guitar players that came to acoustic. And with that, they brought expectations of response and fidelity in those acoustic guitars that didn't previously exist. And so when you take the modern fingerstyle acoustic guitar and judge it by the standards of the same way you might judge a Martin for playing bluegrass or country music or something else, I think that you're missing a key part of the narrative, and that the modern guitar is a synthesis of a Martin and a Stratocaster. That those players expect it to respond and have fidelity like an electric guitar, but still act in ways that an acoustic guitar does, and it's a synthesis of the two. And
When he plays
judge it by
strictly
such.
acoustic, does not play a Maton. He plays a standard design guitar.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so it depends on what you're doing with the guitar.
Yeah, well, still, when Tommy is playing strictly acoustic, he's not playing on a newfangled type guitar. He's playing on a very traditional design guitar. But
I mean, from the reports that I hear, and I don't know him at all, but
I
I
know
know
him
lots of
pretty
people who
well.
have sold to him because he buys a lot of guitars. I don't think Tommy has one guitar he plays. He buys a lot of guitars. And a lot from new makers as well.
He doesn't own a whole. He does not.
Well, I don't know what he ultimately does with them, but I know he exchanges money with people for guitars regularly. And so let's not get into the details too much of one player. That's going to sort of derail the conversation. Really what I'm talking about is the fact that the electric guitar has influenced the acoustic guitar and back and forth now.
There's no question.
Here we
that
are
has
sort of
been doing
70
that.
years later where the volume issue has been solved and volume is no longer the single most important thing with an acoustic
Electric
guitar.
and acoustic really started to come together with groups like Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young, where they would do half their set acoustic, half their set electric, and more with the advent of pickups. But even there, that still is a very much evolving field. The acoustic electric pickup is still that's a matter of an evolving technology that's not done yet.
Well, I totally agree.
Acoustic-electric pickups are still one of the areas where it just isn't where it really is making everybody completely happy, and that they're striving for something more. Acoustic design is really good. It is true that some people have different neck preferences and feel, and they're certainly fanatics on intonation, but the good vintage instruments can be set up to do very, very well so far as intonation, action. They can be set up. But the acoustic electric guitar is an evolving animal. It is not done yet by any means.
I think the guitar will never stop evolving. The guitar is under constant evolution.
Well, evolution is inevitable on almost everything. But the violin, when it comes right down to it, there's not much in the way of violin evolution from 1800 to the present. There's really almost nothing that has evolved. They have different design. They have better designed strings now.
Yeah.
But the bow is not improved over what Tort did. The violin design really hasn't changed from 1800 to the present. A lot of them prefer old Italian violins, except that they're hot rodded to modern standards. They don't have the original bass bar, they don't have the original neck, they don't have the original fingerboard or bridge design, tailpiece design, chin rests and shoulder rests, all that's changed.
Yeah. So what do you think of someone like Ned Steinberger and the NS design steps?
They're functional, not particularly artistic, but they certainly are functional. And mostly what he's concentrating on at this point is bowed instrument design, because he does make a few fretted guitar and body type, but mostly he's doing bowed instruments.
Yeah, that's true.
But he still doodles with acoustic designs as well a bit. But none of his acoustic designs have been particularly successful in the market.
Right.
And the ones I've seen and played didn't impress me. I didn't like the sound or playability of them.
Yeah.
But his electric designs, his bowed instruments, are very well designed. And he certainly thinks outside the box on that. And his stuff is very functional. So far as is it collectible, I doubt that it will be. But
his early work is collectible at this point. Well, they might not bring what you consider to be a lot, but they are collectible at this point in time. And, if we talk about, I guess, if you want to value collectability by economic return, which is certainly a way to talk about certainly supply and demand in that way. In economics, that's one thing. But all of the headless guitars that we have on tour with us here were all the first things to sell. And those companies right now are not laying off people. They're trying to figure out how to make more instruments. And so the musicians are demanding those instruments. Well, while people like Martin and Gibson and Fender are trying to figure out how they can keep the doors open with demand suffering currently, because there's just a lot of those guitars in the world already.
Well, one of the problems with guitars is they don't wear out in the lifetime of the buyer.
Yeah.
And the used ones outnumber the new ones because they don't go away. They're not consumed. So playing it does not consume it. A bottle of wine, after you drink it, you pee.
Yeah.
If you find an expensive meal, you poop in the morning. the guitar does not, well, of course, if you play it like Eddie Van Halen, you may mutilate your guitar after a while, but most players, if they take care of the guitar, they last. So we have plenty of guitars, even from the 1800s, that are in good shape and play very well. But the ones from the 1800s are not designed for steel strings. So they'll play very well with gut or nylon, but they're not designed for today's bluegrass or country music. But it's true that the market is flooded with used guitars. However, the quality of the new Martins is so much better than the quality of the ones made 50 years ago that it's actually killing the demand for used 50-year-old guitars. When I opened up my store, a 50-year-old guitar would have been 1920. And your 40-year-old guitar would have been 1940, 30. And those things are collectible. But
they're collectible now. Do you think they'll maintain value going forth? I mean, it needs that generation, like you talked about with the oil lamps. You know, it needs somebody who cares.
Well, somebody has to care
enough about that sort of body of work and those objects.
The other factor is, though, what will the quality of new guitars be, say, 50 years from now? We don't know, or at least I don't know, because it's Yogi Berra probably would say it's hard to make predictions about the future because it hasn't happened yet. And but for Martin guitars made today to be collectible 20 years, 30 years in the future, well, they'd be highly collectible if Martin were to go out of business. They might also be highly collectible if Martin were still in business, but the quality went to hell. And to some extent, that's what happened in the 1970s. Martin's quality went to hell, and then people wanted the old ones instead. And musical trends changed. Martin has consecutive serial numbers, so you can tell how many they made per year, and you can graph it. It's a very fascinating looking graph. 1972, Martin had built their big new factory, and it was cranking along. They made 22,637 guitars in 1972. By 1982, they made 3,153, which is not enough to keep the doors open. And they were in deep trouble. But economics changed.
Yeah. All of what we consider to be the major brands.
By 1982, prime rate interest was close to 20%.
Yeah.
Home mortgages could be like 18%. You couldn't take out a business loan or a home loan. It wouldn't. You'd have to be crazy to borrow money. It hurt the market, but all kinds of things were going on. Really, the guitar market was doing very nicely. 59 to 63, folk boom. 64 to 68 or so, Beatles, Rolling Stones type. 69 through 75, pretty wide variety, but there was a lot of folk rock. Folk, acoustic and electric were getting together much more. Hadn't been together much before that, but starting around 69, acoustic and electric music started getting together, and people who were formerly mainly electric were now collecting and playing acoustic too, and vice versa. That was a big change. But then after 75, the market just fell apart. And the baby boomers got older. And the professional musicians went on, but the casual players dropped out. And a lot of other folks just changed their lifestyle. And I think part of it is that it used to be that there were 2 times in a person's life when they would be interested in buying guitars. Puberty through about age 20 or 25. And then not at all until retirement age. That would be my parents' generation. Midlife, they didn't play guitar much. They worked their fingers to the bone until they either died or retired, whichever came first. Social Security kicked in at age 65, and most companies could also offer pensions because they figured very few people would live beyond 20, maybe 5 years at most after age 65 was pretty typical. People live longer now on average. The upper limit hasn't changed, but on average, more people live to be older.
Right.
But anyway, that period from 19 up to 75, that's when the baby boomers were still very actively playing. But the next generation that followed wasn't that much interested in the same type music. And there was a period of real doldrums in the guitar market from about 1976 through about 85. After 85, it started picking up again, came roaring back,
I
actually.
mean, there were sections of the guitar market that were roaring in the early 80s. It wasn't the traditional guitar market, though. That's when Grover Jackson came up. That's when Jackson, Charvel, Schecter, ESP, Ibanez.
True. There was heavy metal that was coming along.
Yeah.
It didn't help companies like Martin,
It
Fender,
didn't
or
help
Gibson.
them, but it brought on a whole lot of new companies. This space is normally reserved for brands who make stories like this possible, like the Dario and the Cedar Creek Custom Case Shop. If your company belongs in this conversation, let's talk. We partner with brands who value craft, culture, and the quiet power of a well-placed idea.
Brought a few. Schecter came along too, but yeah, for a while, what was it, the brain fart, the Floyd Rose,
Yeah.
and
Kaler.
which one?
Kaler.
Kaler came along only after Floyd Rose, and it came along because Floyd had an exclusive deal with Kramer. And for a while, the #1 best-selling brand guitar in America was Kramer. Most of them were Asian import, but it was still the #1 selling guitar. And they had an exclusive deal with Floyd where he sold to nobody else. And that's when Kaler came along and tried to get into the market. And there was a lawsuit that went on for some years. Kaler was spending close to $10,000 a month in legal fees trying to defend that. And he ended up losing and having to just license. But that cost him $10,000 was a lot of money back then. And he was spending a lot of money defending that. But of course, Kramer imploded pretty dramatically. And the others went on, but Fender,
Ibanez
Martin,
became one of the most important guitar companies in our industry at that point.
Ibanez did come along strong, and ESP came along. Although Mr. Shibuya actually did also buy traditional guitars. He collected guitars a bit.
Sure. They're not mutually exclusive. I don't understand why they're always juxtaposed. Even at the beginning of this conversation, you seem to juxtapose the idea of the boutique guitar and the guitars that you typically trade in. I don't see that they have to be at odds. I think that you can like both of them. To me, they serve different purposes. I play different things on those instruments when I play them, and I think there's room for both in my life. I would be horrified to have to drink one kind of wine or eat one kind of food the rest of my life, or be stuck in the same conversation forever. And so to me, a musical instrument offers a different conversation. And to think that there's only one kind of conversation to be had or one genre of conversation, to me is just a little too boring. I need novelty to a certain extent. I need the inspiration of innovation, of new things to happen, new possibilities. When I see a new instrument, I think, oh, I wonder what new song is waiting in that. I wonder if there's something that's going to happen. But don't get me wrong, there's plenty of non-contributing dysfunctional instruments being made. But I like to remain open to the possibility that it might inspire me to do something.
I agree. There are some extremely good boutique guitars being made, but there's also a lot of them that are not very good.
Yeah, sure. But when we're talking about the Brian Gallups and the Michael Greenfields of the world, these people
those guys
are very
good.
great, competent guitar makers.
Those are very competent, very good makers. And that, I agree, they're very good. Now, I have several Gallup guitars, and they're very good. The ones I have, on the other hand, in my opinion, don't do anything I can't do as well or better on an old Martin. I don't see that Gallup has come up with a design that in any way makes the old one obsolete at all. Linda Manzer has done some new things that obviously you can't do on a vintage anything because her multi-string guitars, whatever, that those are completely different and definitely experimental.
There's a fidelity to
there is room
guitars
for
that don't exist in
experimentation.
vintage guitars.
There's always room for experimentation. Even Stradivari and Guarneri, while their designs may look similar, they were continuously experimenting. And the best Stradivari's were not his earliest ones. They're more in the range of when he was about 75 years old. He wasn't as creative at age 93. He did live to be 94, which in 1737 to die at age 94, that was a mighty, mighty, mighty rare thing because you have to figure that antibiotics were not yet invented, and going to a doctor more often than not would be harmful rather than helpful. Bleeding you and whatever was not exactly going to help your health. So, but there's always still room for experimentation. Even on traditional design, we do find that if we're replacing a bridge plate and we replace it with one that's exact original specs versus if we do a sandwich with a graphite in the middle, the graphite ones often sound better. And that's a very subtle thing that's virtually invisible. You can't look, even if you put a mirror in, you'd never know there's a graphite core in the middle of that bridge plate. But it works real well. And it does give you more sustain, and it's actually it's very good for tone. So I'm not totally a traditionalist.
Oh, I know you're not. I've seen your own guitar designs.
And my guitar designs are not very traditional. So yeah, there's room, but it still is such that it's very difficult to improve on some of the old ones. But the golden era ones are remarkably versatile, and they're remarkably fine quality, and the materials are good, the workmanship is good, the materials are good, and on the better makers, the design is good. And a lot of makers that do boutique guitars, is a moderate number of them that, as far as I'm concerned, don't have good designs. The ones that have good designs and good craftsmanship, they're making some very fine instruments. And if there's a golden age of guitar building, we're sort of in one, because there are more makers of guitars now doing handmade, high-quality instruments than ever before in the history of the instrument. If you go back to the 1930s or in the 1920s, there were some small shop builders, but not that many that made things that were truly good. And you look in the 1930s, Martin, Gibson, and Larson Brothers in Chicago, but Larson was a two-man shop. Of course, there was D'Angelico and Stromberg making arch tops, but there weren't a whole lot of good arch top makers. You could get Gibson or Epiphone. You could get D'Angelico and Stromberg, but there wasn't a heck of a lot more that was really good arch tops. And on really good flat tops, well, Martin, Gibson, and Larson, but not a heck of a lot more. I mean, there were Weissenborn guitars that were okay, but not the Weissenborn construction was certainly not on par with a Martin. But if you wanted to play Hawaiian style with the hollow neck, the Weissenborn did pretty well for that. But the Epiphone flat top guitars pre-war were not very good. Their arch tops were good. The Epiphone arch tops made from about prior to 1936 were very good. The ones from 36 through early 40s were plenty good, but not as good as the ones from 36 on back.
Right.
But those early Epis are very rare. But an Epiphone Deluxe from the early to mid-30s is a very good guitar, but also an extremely rare guitar.
Right.
But there were a few boutique builders back then, but most of them really weren't very good.
Well, I mean, Epiphone would have been considered a boutique builder by the definition of just being limited in production.
Well, Epiphone had a factory.
Yeah, well.
I would consider it.
Sorry, I was thinking your description of Larson Brothers, pardon me. It's just the two people making guitars. I mean, that's...
Two guys there. Larson was boutique, but even there, they didn't view it as boutique. They were making utility tools. They were selling them to musicians who just wanted something to play. They did some that were fancy, but for the most part, they were selling to professional musicians who were buying them to use.
I know boutique builders like that today.
Yeah.
But
you have to figure Larson wasn't getting much money, so they were not getting rich on it. It was a small shop. It had a dirt floor. It had electricity, but no power tools.
Right.
And it was pretty primitive. But I do have 5 Larsons in a row right behind you. And, but they didn't have a real boutique market in the sense that we have today.
No, I mean, well, one, you'd have to define what boutique means in the first place to you and to me, and to see if we would actually...
Well, even
call it
Angelico
something.
had prices that were pretty much equivalent to what a new Gibson cost. With the difference being, though, that Gibson sold them through dealers who got them at half that,
Right.
and Angelico sold them straight to the consumer for what would be the retail price of a Gibson. But most of Angelico's customers were professional musicians who were buying them as a working tool. They weren't really thinking of them as collectible.
Right.
And his market actually was going down later in his life because the demand for acoustic arch tops had really fallen with the advent of electric guitars so strongly in the 50s and 60s. The number of guitars he made per year was down. He did far better in the 30s than he did in the 50s or 60s. And even then, he had a little shop on Carmine Street. It was not a big, fancy place at all.
Stood outside. Yeah.
And he would make pretty much anything that somebody ordered. If you wanted an electric mandola shaped like a shotgun, he would make it.
Yeah.
And you know how I know he would do that? I saw one. But if you wanted your Vega banjo converted from short or standard scale to having a Pete Seeger length long neck, he'd just graft the piece on to the original neck, and in fact, that's what Pete had for a while. But he took in repair jobs, anything he could to just make ends meet. He was not getting rich at it. So the days when you could actually make a serious living at it as a boutique builder, that's changed. I mean, somebody like Monteleone can build a guitar a month and get over $100,000 per guitar now. And that's, and he doesn't need to have employees. He lives in a house he inherited. He builds at home. He can take a month off if he feels like it. He can work whatever hours of the day or night he feels like. And he can be as creative as he wants to be.
Yeah.
He can build bespoke, or he can just design his own and somebody will buy it anyway. Which, that was a tremendous frustration for DeQuisto.
Right.
He had back orders. And he had ideas in his head that he wanted to build things that were different. And the customers wanted him to just fill their back orders that he took deposits on. So he ended up just refunding all the deposits and telling them to go fly a kite. He'd build what he wanted after that.
Yeah. And we see the same thing today with guitar makers with high demand. Some of them, if they're more artistic guitar makers and they have years worth of orders, say, I don't want to do this anymore because I can't make what I want to make. And they'll just go to building their own spec and then offer it for sale at that point in time.
Well, it's a rather ego-deflating thing to only have demand for the stuff that you designed years ago, and everybody wants you to do the same thing over and over and over again. If you are a creative artist, you know, Picasso wouldn't do that. Van Gogh wouldn't do that. Of course, if you want to be as successful commercially as Van Gogh, that's not a good goal, is it?
Right.
Because you know how many Van Goghs were sold in his lifetime.
Yeah, it wasn't him, wasn't his brother, his sister-in-law eventually got some sold, right? Yeah.
Well, none were sold in his lifetime.
No, yeah, exactly. But he didn't have any commercial success until he was already gone. His brother was gone. Yeah. And it was his brother's wife who eventually got him his work going and recognized. DeQuisto
was very, very frustrated. But then he also was, he always felt people were trying to take advantage of him anyway, because one thing that also pissed him off is that he would finish a guitar, sell it to the guy, collect the money, and then that guy would immediately turn around and get 2 or 3 times as much for it right away, and Jimmy wasn't getting the money.
So happens today.
That also bugged him.
Yeah. I hear that problem today also with certain makers have the same issue.
Now, Wayne Henderson, the same thing.
Yeah.
He charges very little, but he knows up front that it's just, you wait a long time to get one, and if you do that, you probably won't get another one.
Right.
But Wayne's actually not interested so much in making the money as he likes to build them. He likes to build them for the right people, and but he knows perfectly well how much they're selling for on the secondary market, and he's not charging anything remotely close to that for a new one. Whereas Monteleone has figured out the formula on how he can make big bucks, but it helped to have the display at the Met.
Right.
And it was interesting that the Met only would pick New York Italian American.
Yeah.
In other words, Epiphone was Greek, that wouldn't work. Stromberg was Boston, that wouldn't work.
Yeah.
They only featured Italian American, which got it down.
Even the show was called Cremona to New York.
Well,
so it was in the design of the shows from the beginning, wasn't it?
Yes,
so you've got the book right there, don't you? I think I observed earlier on, it's the Rudy Pence's Cremona to New York book is right behind you, I think.
Yeah. But still, I find that a rather narrow view of archtops. The connection from Cremona would be every bit as strong for Epiphone or for Stromberg.
I know Linda Manzer studied with Jimmy DeQuisto, and she went to the show, and she didn't make any big complaints, but she felt, hey, I'm part of this story. Didn't get mentioned.
No, I think that when it comes right down to it, Rudy Pence was able to get the right connections to get done what he wanted to do. It reminds me a little bit of Nacho Banya did a book on Fender Telecasters, Blackguards, and what an interesting coincidence that almost immediately after the book was published, you could buy those guitars that he had. You could hear, yours is on page number whatever, and They were for sale.
Well, I mean, almost every guitar around you, those companies have a narrative about their innovations and about their history, which you've dropped little pearls throughout this conversation that tell you that they don't always line up.
Well,
and that there's commercial motives behind a lot of the narratives that exist out
but
there.
when it comes down to it, still, number one is still design, whether it's new or old design. If it's a heavy metal guitar, Grover Jackson did some great designs for heavy metal. It works. So I'm not saying there's only one type of guitar. There's so many different kinds of guitars. It's actually rather difficult to come up with a dictionary definition for what is a guitar.
Yes.
In fact, that's a standard question I ask people. Can you give me a dictionary definition that's not ambiguous of what is a guitar, that will apply to pretty well any guitar, that if you didn't know anything about guitars and you walked into a room that had a variety of instruments, would you be able to use this definition and where most any guitar would work? Can you come up with such a definition of what is a guitar?
Yeah. Can you?
No.
No. I'm dialing it in. I think I have.
What would it be?
Yeah. So to me, a guitar is a chordophone that exists with the mechanical interface of strings being pressed to the fretboard in particular tunings, because that qualifies for any chordophone, any violin also, right? But it is the mechanical interface, the user interface, that defines the difference between what a guitar is versus also the woodwinds family.
It doesn't work.
There's a keyed instrument system.
How does that not include a lute, which is clearly not a guitar?
Well, I said in particular tunings.
Tuning, there's no standard guitar tuning.
Yes, there is.
No, there isn't. If you play Hawaiian, you've probably never used standard tuning. If you're a Delta blues player, you also probably never used standard tuning. If you're Indian and you play guitar, you've probably also never used it.
Never used what?
Standard, what we call standard tuning.
So there is a tuning. It's the standard. You're using the word yourself.
It's what we have called standard, except that a high percentage of guitar players have never, ever played in it.
Yeah, but you're defeating your own argument. It is the standard. So you can deviate as much as you want. There's always little bits of distribution here.
It wasn't even, the original
here.
guitars weren't even in that tuning.
Sure, but the modern guitar starts really with Torres in 1850-ish?
No.
At that point?
Absolutely
What
not.
do you say it is? Because I teach in guitar making schools around the world.
Well, the Martin guitar is not
and
influenced
they
by
all
Torres.
teach them how to make a Torres guitar, and they teach them how to make a Martin guitar.
Well, the modern guitar does not start with Torres because Martin never followed Torres, and it still has a clear line. So there's plenty of guitars that are not at all influenced by Torres.
It's what we call the modern guitar, George.
The modern guitar, most of them have evolved from either Torres or Martin or Gibson, but when it comes down to it, standard tuning, we can call it standard, but the fact is it really isn't standard.
We have to design the instrument to bear a certain load, to respond within a certain range. And when a guitar maker makes a guitar, they are tuning it to a particular spot to say, does it sound good or doesn't it? They don't put it into all sorts of
The Hawaiian guitars are all for a different tuning.
Yes.
And the fact is, I don't think you can define it by the tuning.
Strings won't last. The system won't last if you try and tune it too high. The system implodes at that point in time. So it has to be within a particular range.
Well, all the people who use alternative tunings are still doing it within a similar enough pitch range. Although you can still have an octave guitar.
Sure.
Or even things like the 518 up there, that wasn't designed for what we call standard pitch. That was designed to be tuned at least 3 frets up.
Sure, but that is not what's in the majority of your store. No. When Martin tests a guitar, when Gibson tests a guitar in the lab, when D'Addario makes new strings in the lab, they are tuning those guitars to the standard which you're referring to. And of course they have to go within a range negative and positive of that,
Well, there's
of the
also
standard.
But yeah, if you're playing Delta blues, ain't nobody's using standard tuning. If you're playing Hawaiian, whether it's round neck or Hawaiian with a bar, they're not using standard tuning. And a high number of guitars sold go to people who don't use standard tuning or who use multiple tunings. So I don't define guitar by how it's tuned.
I think you can make an argument about the fringes on anything, but we have to typically
It's not
work
fringes,
within
it's major parts of the market.
it's
What percentage of the guitars that you sell do you think are going to people who are not going to tune it to standard tuning?
A pretty small percentage of my customers, but there's a significant number though. If they're playing blues, a goodly number of them do not tune to standard tuning.
So what is the difference between a small percentage and a fringe to you?
I just simply don't define guitar that way because lots of players play different tunings.
Okay, so at the beginning of this portion of our conversation,
And guitar
you
didn't
challenge
start out
people
with
to
that.
make a description that is not ambiguous, but you seem to be committed to the ambiguity.
As a guitar builder and a player, you have a sense for when something's working right. That's why so many of the world's best trust D'Addario. Unmatched tone, perfect intonation, and strings made to the tightest tolerances in the industry. That reputation is no accident. It's the result of 400 years of being obsessed with quality and innovation. D'Addario, when you know, you know.
Well, I just simply don't accept tuning as a definition. And lutes come up, they got frets, they're in a similar pitch range.
Come on, I mean, we can talk about a viola being, I'm not talking about the tuning being the primary factor. I'm saying it needs to be a part of the factor. The relative tuning to each other. You know, the relative tuning of the strings to each other are, you know, so I know without being a violin player that the violin is tuned in a similar sequence to what the mandolin is. And I know the mandolin, I have to think for myself as someone who's mostly a guitar player, if I approach a mandolin, if I'm thinking about doing any chords, I am thinking about the high four strings of my guitar and trying to flip my brain upside down to understand where I'm at on a mandolin, right? There's a relative range that helps us. We have to give narrative or framework to the world in some way.
Although it is worth noting that in country fiddling, almost all the old-timey fiddlers are either in open A or open D.
Okay.
And they do open tunings
As I
on
said,
violin.
I'm not a violin or a fiddler.
Violin is not defined by its tuning.
Yeah. But by its range it is. Otherwise we call it a viola, a cello, or a contrabass. Right?
The violin does have it has a range and a general size. Violin does not perform well in a different size. If you change the size of the violin, it definitely does not work well.
Yeah. It's been dialed in.
You can't make it much smaller or much bigger. You have very small range on violins where it just doesn't perform well.
Not with the same materials anyways. Yeah.
Well, a bigger violin just doesn't produce good sound.
We call it a viola.
Well,
So,
the viola is actually a compromise instrument. There's no standard size for viola. It's whatever's the biggest that's comfortable to play. Violin is a very specific size because it works acoustically and it's comfortable enough to hold within that range too, but it happens that it works acoustically where everything is in balance, string length, pitch of the air chamber, it all works very, very well together, and the others are all compromises. Violas and cellos, really, and even the basses ought to be bigger according to the mathematical formulas, but they would be too cumbersome to play.
So, George, thank you. We should say goodbye, wrap up. We have to be in Columbus, Ohio.
We may not agree on everything, but when it still comes
Wouldn't
down
life be
to
boring
it,
if we didn't agree, or if we agreed on everything?
I think it is fair to say, though, that what got collecting started was that the baby boom generation was not happy with the quality of the new instruments of the mid-'60s through the '80s.
Paired with luxury.
That caused people to get interested in vintage, but also caused people to get interested in starting to make new instruments that were better than the ones by the major commercial makers. And that did get a lot of individual luthiers into it. There are far more people today making guitars than ever before in the history of the instrument. There are hundreds of them.
Thousands.
Well, hundreds that are good. There are
According to
thousands,
George
but there are
Gruhn.
hundreds that are good. But the point is, in the past, I used to feel that I could count all the good makers of guitars in the USA that were not a major company like Martin, Fender, Gibson, whatever. They would pretty much be countable on the fingers of one hand, and then it got to the point of fingers of two hands. Now I don't have enough digits or appendages. The number of people making good guitars is greater than ever before. Some of them are really inspired and very good. Some are okay. Some are heavy ornamentation, but frankly not good sound. But some of them have heavy ornamentation and great sound. I mean, Grit Laskin can do amazing inlay work, and the guitars are good too. So ornamentation does not have to be bad, but some ornamentation I think is tasteful, and some it's a matter of personal preference. But seeing how many cherubs and angels you can get per square inch or something, that doesn't make it better art.
Right.
Sometimes good art may be rather understated, but beautiful lines. But the point is, yeah, there are a lot of really good builders now, but there are some who are asking a lot of money for instruments that, in my opinion, really don't merit it. But I also don't understand art where somebody just has a canvas and paints a red stripe down the middle and it's worth $1 million. So some people think that Jackson Pollocks are worth a lot of money and they're willing to pay a lot, and I don't personally like them, but I recognize that not everybody has to share my opinions.
Ultimately, it's the buyer who gets
But
to
there
decide.
really are different types of collectors. And there are memorabilia collectors. There are collectors of beautifully ornamented guitars. There are collectors of innovative designs. There are collectors of vintage acoustics, vintage electrics. And then there are people who just want instruments that they had made bespoke for them, and they don't want anything used. They want only things made by boutique builders, but only to their personal specs. And they're very different motivations. And they're separate markets in a way, they're different type customers. And some I relate to better than others.
Right.
But also for me, as a dealer, I don't make any money on boutique guitars that they sell only direct to the public. So that doesn't help me. But what I do find is that most of those, when it comes down to resale, it's really tough to sell them.
It can be.
It can be very tough to sell them. There are people who will pay big money for a new one, and these very same people will not buy a used one by the same maker. They only want one made personally for them.
Yeah, there's all sorts of, as you said, neuroses to the reason that people buy things in general. You can take the most desirable guitar in your store and put it in the average mom and pop store in Buffalo, New York, and they won't get it sold. You'll get it sold, and you'll get it sold for the right value, but they won't have access to the right customer. And the same thing happens. The same thing happens in the boutique guitar market, and the same thing happens in the car market. You could take a very desirable 1960s Ferrari and put it on the local Ford lot here, and unless the right person finds out about it, they'll never get the right price for it. And so when you deal with niches upon niches, then the value of someone like yourself The value of someone like myself is that we're specialists within niches of areas, and we have access to the most likely people to want to participate in those conversations.
Well, we also have the advent of technology such that eBay came along and then Reverb came along, and the internet permits people to connect often enough bypassing traditional dealers.
If you know how to do it. Lots of people don't know how to do it either. So more and more, there's access to it. You're right.
It changes.
But the communication, the narrative, how to deal with that person, how to talk about it, all those things matter. And so...
basic human psychology hasn't changed. And in fact, Claude P. Hopkins did a book, copyright 1928, Scientific Advertising and My Life in Advertising. Two books that were, you can get in paperback in one volume together. It's worth reading because he was doing things like Bissell floor sweepers that didn't plug in but had the rotating brushes. He came out there, things like the exotic wood of the month, almost the exact same things like when Martin and Gibson had Guitar of the Month programs. It's all there in the 1890s he was doing that stuff. The same marketing techniques and the same marketing techniques that you see on TV now, your product code, number whatever, yep, coupons and all of that. He had that all figured out before the Great Depression ever hit.
Well, what changes is what we desire. So the psychology is the same, but what we find valuable. That we don't find oil lamps desirable today. And you know what they're finding desirable 20 years from now, we can't predict really, because the values of the culture will evolve.
Actually,
and not
you
necessarily
can predict some of it. Because at about age 40, people tend to have a midlife crisis. They often want to get either the things they aspired to have when they were 15 to 20, but never could get, or maybe even the supernormal stimulus of that, an even fancier one. But basically, a lot of the concept of imprinting, age 15 through 20, puberty through 20, a lot of your interests are wired into your brain and will stay there throughout life. But when you're 40, you have money and a midlife crisis, and they tend to go on a buying spree. Now, what are the people who are, what are they going to be fixated on 20 years from now? Who do you look at to figure out what a future trend could be 20 years from now? If you look at what today's 15 to 20-year-olds want, and then figure that 20 years from now, they'll be 40. That is likely to have a significant impact.
There's a portion of it.
You can look at maybe what's going to be a hot trend 10 years from now. Look at the people who were 20, who would go 20 years back from 10 years from now, then see what those people wanted at that time.
I agree, but that's your market, not mine. Because your market's a reenactment market, and the people who want to relive their earlier years will come and buy those things from you. But the people who are looking for new possibilities, they won't find them in the past.
They will find some of it in the past, even things like automotive.
It's roughly 50%. It's the reason that half of your population votes Democratic and why half of it votes Republican. That is pretty much hardwired. Is we have an impulse towards the golden years, or we have an impulse towards brighter new futures. And unfortunately, in our humanity, we're about 50-50. Canada's the same thing almost everywhere. We're about 50-50. And so that's why, we live within the same space, but I'm always thinking about the new possibilities, and those are much harder to predict. You're talking about people coming back and wanting to relive their previous glories, and I agree with you. You can predict more of that, and that's probably a more stable business model for you.
But the other thing that is difficult to predict is sometimes technological change. In 1940,
Yeah.
people really didn't predict what was going to go on with electric guitars.
Mm-hmm.
And electric guitars made a huge difference.
Mm-hmm.
Now, where you go from here on some of that, acoustic amplification is not where it is going to be in the future. It's rapidly evolving.
Neither electric. All those people who came and bought our headless and multi-scope guitars, they don't own amplifiers at all. They play in their computers, and they play with headphones, and they play with reference monitors. They're not buying a guitar amplifier. They're electric guitar players, sans amplifier.
Well,
And those guitars, many of them are designed ergonomically to play in a position where you play in a gaming chair. They don't own guitar straps. If you watch all the highest views of young players playing on YouTube with millions of views, they're sitting down, no strap. No strap, no amplifier. That's a huge implication for our industry that a lot of people are not paying attention to.
well, it's going to be
Yeah.
challenging for companies like Martin, Gibson,
Yeah.
and Fender, because often enough they have not been very up on current trends. Fender didn't do vintage style guitars as reissues until a full decade after the Japanese were already doing it.
Right.
And the Japanese were doing pretty faithful copies of Sunburst Les Pauls even in the fairly early 70s.
Mm-hmm.
But Gibson didn't do, the Standard 80 was the first thing. It sort of looked like a Sunburst Paul, and even there it wasn't that good.
Right.
But
That's where the boutique market and the manufacturers go hand in hand. Because actually, it's usually some small builders who start doing that stuff when there's enough attention drawn to it. I don't think we'd have a Fender custom shop or a Gibson custom shop without there being a handful of boutique makers who were basically doing those things. And then a company like Fender never sold a guitar that was many thousands of dollars the way they do in a custom shop. That came out of the boutique marketplace, I think.
well,
You observed it in a different way than I did, because I'm paying mostly attention to the boutique market. Yeah.
I don't see that much of the boutique market.
Yeah, I know.
And when I do, most of the boutique guitars I see
Yeah.
do not impress me.
Yeah.
And I am somewhat bemused at some of them at the prices that they're asking. So, but I still would maintain that standard tuning isn't really that standard.
Well, we're talking about averages.
You've been listening to Life with Strings Attached. If today's conversation meant something to you, consider passing it on. These stories find their place through the people who share them. A new episode comes out every Friday, right here, wherever you're listening. I'm Jamie Gale, and thanks for listening to Life with Strings Attached.